All right, we'll start now, and hopefully those that have been invited will be able to join. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome. There's still some room at the table. Not much, Baruch Hashem, but there is some. There's right there at the end. Brothers-in-law. Or here. You can sit here. All right, so a little introduction about this class, and then a little bit about halacha and shulchan aruch, and then a little bit about Hilchos Shabbos. And if we get to it, we'll actually start learning something. So, as you all know, we do a Hilchos Shabbos, and then we do Mirz Hashem, I believe, up to Berchas Hanen and next. Also, B'chalav, some of you already did, and then Hilchos Nida, which we just finished. And
what was the next one?
Hilchos Nida.
No, the one.
Berchas Hanen. So there's usually I give mini tests during the year, like when we finish a subtopic. That's a written test, and then Rabbi Vosner from Muncie test at the end of every topic. And that's really the one that counts. The ones I do in the middle are just for you to, know where you're holding, and for me to know where you're holding. Then at the end of the 4 years, in Mirz Hashem, if you are still in the program, hopefully, Vosner tests like a general test on all the topics. So you should review as you go along and not forget. This test is not as detailed at the end as it is, for each specific topic, but nevertheless, that he wants people to actually remember what they learn. In terms of, yeah, now you know. It's good you know now. You shouldn't say I sprang it on you later. So the way it works here is we learn from 8 to 10, and it's important that we have a minyan. Baruch Hashem, today we have more than a minyan, and I hope it'll stay that way, and that way we can have a Ma'ariv at 10 o'clock. Rabbeinu Moshe, a big honor. Nice to have you back. A graduate student. Shkoyach. We need more tables in here. Nice.
Looks like a day one, Rabbi.
Yeah. Yeah. Shalom Aleichem. Remind me your name. We've met before, but I don't remember. Avrami? Yes. Very good. Shalom Aleichem.
What's that?
All right. Aleichem Shalom. Nice to see you. Shkoyach for bringing your friends. Okay, so in general, just to know in advance, we usually learn during the summer as well, except there's usually a 3-week break at some point. We usually learn the whole winter besides one break for, at some point, Yeshiva week or whatever that is. And then Pesach time, we have a little break before Pesach and Pesach itself, and of course Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur time as needed. But other than that, I try pretty much to do every Monday and Tuesday night. So best if you can all do the same and organize your lives accordingly. But of course, if you miss, all of these shiurim are recorded online, and I can send you a link, and you can follow it afterwards. There's $100 a month, which I think is pretty reasonable, and you can pay it in cash, check, PayPal, whatever works for you. There's a small fee for the tests, also from Rabbi Vosner, just to pay him for his time, usually about $100, and that's pretty much it. All right, so I'm just going to give a little bit of historical background to Shulchan Aruch and Halacha, and then a little bit about Hilchos Shabbos more specifically. So I sent it out as a handout, and I'll resend it afterwards to whoever didn't get it yet. So of course, everybody knows the Mishnah was written by Yehuda Nasi, the Gemara by Ravina and Rav Ashi. And the Gemara is basically accepted by Klal Yisrael as halacha. You cannot argue on the Gemara. That's of course. And after that, we have different opinions about how to paskin. Sometimes the Gemara is not clear. The Gemara stays with a machlokes, or there's different ways of understanding the Gemara. And that's when halacha starts to get complicated. So I'll just mention some of the major Rishonim, so you should know and be familiar with their names and their works, and then some of the major Achronim. So the Rif is printed in the back of almost every Gemara, and the Rif was Rabbeinu Yitzchak Alfasi of Fez, and Tunisia also, if I'm not mistaken. And he basically wrote on the Gemara, he took the parts of the Gemara that are relevant in halacha. He left out the other parts. And then he wrote what the halacha is. If there's a machlokes and whatever it is, he wrote the actual halacha. So it follows the same order of the Gemara. Same chapter, same everything. Sometimes he actually put things together from different sources, like Hilchos Nida and so on. But usually it's parak by parak according to the Gemara. And it's usually printed with Rashi. Rashi didn't write a pirush on the Rif, but they took the Rashi that's on the Gemara and they put it next to the Rif, as well as the Ran is usually also next to him. That's another one of the Rishonim. And then of course there's Rashi, who is mostly a mefared, mostly a commentary on the Gemara, explaining the pshat of the Gemara, but from time to time he will give us an opinion in halacha, and of course that's an important opinion. Then there's the opinion of Tosfos, and Tosfos was the major source of halacha for Ashkenazic Jewry. In fact, there is a rule, I've mentioned it here in the past, that for Ashkenazim, look like Tosfos. The way the rule is actually worded is that halacha is like the Rif whenever Tosfos does not argue with him. That's a rule. I think the Maharam says that rule. But the implication of that rule is that halacha is like Tosfos always, because basically that became the standard halacha, just like the Yemenites accepted the Rambam as halacha, final halacha. So Tosfos became standard halacha for Ashkenazim. Now, when we say Tosfos, there's the Tosfos himself. I mean, that's the way it's found on the side of the Gemara. And then there's many Baalei Tosfos and students of the Baalei Tosfos who wrote their own Sfarim that are more or less in line with the opinions of Tosfos. So, for example, we have the Sefer Atruma by Reb Baruch of Germaiza. He was one of the Baalei Tosfos. We have the Sefer called the Ravia. Also, he was one of the Baalei Tosfos. And the rest of them are not coming to my head right now. But I think the Yereim, Rabbi Eliezer of Mitz, was also considered in that school. So that's a very important opinion. And people in Tosfos are Rabbeinu Tam, the Ri, Rashbam. Many of them were grandsons of Rashi. All right. Of course, the Rambam is a major pillar of halacha from Morocco, then lived in Spain, Morocco, and Egypt. And he, of course, wrote the Mishnah Torah, which encompasses all of halacha. I'm sorry? What do you mean?
Where else do we learn Sanhedrin other than in Mishnah Torah?
Well, he wrote halacha on things that are not, exclusively for nowadays. So that's different than the Shulchan Aruch. That's actually unique to the Rambam, different than the Rif and the Rosh and the Shulchan Aruch. He wrote halacha in all areas. But he did not give his reasoning often, and he also didn't give his sources. So that's why sometimes it's not so easy to understand him, and that's why there's a lot of commentaries on the Rambam trying to figure it out. The major commentaries of the Rambam are the Magid Mishnah, written by, I think his name was Vidal, and Vidal Tzarfati, if I'm not mistaken. He was a student of the Rashba. The Kesef Mishnah also comments on the Rambam. That's written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the same author as the Shulchan Aruch, from Spain, not long after the Rambam. The Rashba, also Spain, 1235, a little bit after the Ramban. Then you have the Rosh. The Rosh was originally from Germany, And he left Germany and moved to Spain when his teacher was imprisoned and ended up dying in prison. His teacher was the Maharam of Rottenburg, and he was imprisoned and held for ransom, and he didn't allow the community to pay his ransom, the whole thing. Anyway, the Rosh escaped, so the same thing shouldn't happen to him, and he lived the rest of his life in Spain. So he kind of spanned the two worlds of Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jewry. And he is also, of course, another major pillar in halacha. The Mordechai was a student of the Maharam of Rottenburg, like I mentioned. He's printed in the back of every Gemara, pretty much. Then you have the Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol and the Sefer Mitzvahs Katan. The Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol is by Rav Moshe of Kusi, one of the Balei HaTosfos. He wrote an explanation on every one of the 613 mitzvahs and his opinion on those mitzvahs in halacha. The Sefer Mitzvahs Katan by Yitzchak of Kervil is a small book of mitzvahs, and it's only focusing on the mitzvahs that are relevant today. He actually divided it into the days of the week because he wanted people to review it and learn it one day every week, and that way they would pretty much know it by heart. Okay, and then we have the Tur. Al HaTurim is the one that, he's the son of the Rosh, by the way, and he divided halacha into the system we have today that the Shulchan Aruch follows. Ur Chaim is on the laws of daily living, Tefillah, Shabbos, Yontif, and so on, brachas. Yerodea, the halachas of Isser v'Heter, Kashrus, Hilchos Nida, forbidden foods, and so on. And Even Ezer, marriage and divorce, and Choshen Mishpat is the areas of civil monetary law. And he also subdivided it into little sections to make it easier to find what you were looking for. And he was really the first one that made that system. Actually, the Rambam had a similar concept. And that was, instead of following the Gemara, because the Gemara sometimes brings in areas of halacha that are not related, to that Masechta, because that's just the style of writing the Gemara has. So the Tur brings everything from the different Masechtas and puts it into the one section that he's talking about, whatever it is, Shabbos or Yontif or whatever it is. So the being the son of the Rosh, he gives a primary importance to his father's opinion, as he writes himself in his own introduction, that he brings different opinions. He tries to bring the major opinions of the Rishonim that preceded him, but he gives a primary importance to his father's opinion, that of the Rosh. Now, the Beis Yosef, a book that would encompass all of the opinions on halacha up to his day, to make it easy for a person to learn halacha, because otherwise it's very difficult to track down all the opinions on any one given topic. And he chose to write it as a pirush on the Tur. It's not that he was a chassid of the Tur specifically, like he wasn't a student of the Tur. He was Sephardic in Tzfas, and the Tur was in Spain, Ashkenazic or whatever. But it was simply that the Tur had made a good system and had started the work that he wanted to finish. The difference is that the Tur just brought it, much more bekitzer, and didn't bring all the opinions, didn't bring the Gemaras and the reasons and the back and forth. He just brought the opinions in halacha. So the Beis Yosef expands on the Tur and brings you the sources, gives you the Gemara, gives you the Rashi usually, and then gives you the Rishonim, and then how to actually paskin halacha. How does he paskin in halacha? The Beis Yosef says himself in his introduction to the Beis Yosef. He says, who are we to decide between different opinions in halacha? Just wondering if anybody's watching me long distance. And I see Yossi is here, but I don't see anybody else. How are you, Yossi?
Hashem, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, well. You had a good Yontif?
Yes. Well, it's been a while.
Very good. Yossi, they want to know if you're in Kazakhstan.
No, I've finished that project. I'm now working in London.
London. Very good.
Although next week I'll be in Israel.
Oh, very good. Okay, so let's continue. So I'm just going over the handout that I sent earlier about the halachic background to the Shulchan.
Yep, I'm following along.
Very good. So the Beis Yosef writes that we don't have the power to, on our own, decide who the halacha should be like amongst the Rishonim, to decide who's right and who's wrong. Each one has opinions. Each one has reasons for their opinions, and we don't have the authority to be able to decide. And therefore, he says his system is going to be, he's going to follow the majority of the major Rishonim, the major pillars. And he considers the major pillars to be the Rif and the Rambam and the Rosh. Those are his pillars. So if two of them hold an opinion, whatever that opinion is, he will follow the two over the one. Now, sometimes one of them doesn't give an opinion, and the other two may be arguing with each other. So he has 5 supporting pillars, and they are the Ramban that I mentioned, the Rashba, the Ran, the Mordechai, and the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol. So those are his supporting pillars. Now he does say that if there are occasions that within the 3, there's a majority, the 2 of them hold one thing, but the Rishonim that came after them all disagreed, and the halacha is like those later ones, so the minhag is like those later ones, then he'll follow that minhag. It only happens like once or twice in the whole Shulchan Aruch, but he does give that caveat that sometimes, on rare occasion, he will depart from the majority of the 3 if everybody else does, and that's the minhag. And then he does say another important thing. He says if there is a place that is more machmir than his psak, right? He's passing like 2 of the 3. Maybe that's a lenient opinion. If there's a place that has accepted the more strict opinion, they must continue to follow that opinion because they've accepted it upon themselves. So they can't now change and be more mekel. They want to change and be more machmer, following his view, that's fine. But they cannot change and be more lenient if they've already accepted a different psak. So, in summing up the accomplishment of his work, I came across this interesting line from the Beis Yosef. He says, a person who reads my work will have in front of him the Gemara, the opinions of Rashi, Tosfos, Ran, Rif, Rosh, Mordechai, Ramban, Agois, Maimoni. I mentioned all of those besides Agois, Maimoni. That's a commentary on the Rambam, also written by a student of the Maharam. The Maggid Mishnah I mentioned. Rabbeinu Yerucham, a student of the Rosh. Sefer Truma I mentioned. Shivle HaLeket, I didn't mention, but I don't remember too much about him right now. Rekeach, Shari Dura, Tashbetz, Itur, Mugiyosas, Mag Smak, Orchas Chaim, Teres Abayis, Agois Ashri, etc., etc. You'll see it for yourselves in the printout if you have it, or I'll send it to you later. Okay. When the Machaber wrote the Shulchan Aruch, he wrote it basically as a kitzer of the Beis Yosef. So the Beis Yosef, it takes a long time to learn because you have to learn all the sources and all the opinions and why they say what they say, where they got it from. If you want to know the practical halacha, it takes a long time. So he made the Shulchan Aruch so that it'll be like a Shulchan Aruch, like a set table. You don't have to go to the kitchen and prepare supper. You come in, everything is set and ready to go. So you can open up and you can right away find out what to do. He actually recommends in his introduction that it should be reviewed every few months so that you know it by heart. And that's what it is, Shulchan Aruch, because it contains many delicacies. Okay, so then came Rav Moshe Isserlich of Krakow, a great Ashkenazic sage. Video call from Daniel Kahani. Hello? Hi. Do you want to join the shir?
Yeah.
I'll just send you a link and you can join online, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Daniel, 1 second. Let me just make sure I have your email address. What's your email address again?
Daniel.Kahani@gmail.com.
Okay, actually, I'm going to send it in an email separately. Okay, I'll get it in a second.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Bye. I'm sorry? Yeah, I sent it to your friend, but I don't see him here. Does he have a Gmail address? It works better with Gmail. I sent it to him, but I don't know. Okay. Does he want to call in? He could call in on your phone. No, he could call in on your phone if he's not getting through. And he can just watch it that way. I'm going to call this fellow and see if he wants to join that way. Oh, I see you, David. Thank you. Now I see you. Perfect. And Daniel as well. Okay. Very good. We're going through the historical background of the Shulchan Aruch, and I was just talking about the Ramah. That is Daniel, David, and Yossi. If you don't mind just muting yourself unless you have a question. All right. So we were talking about the Ramah. The Ramah writes that he was originally going to write a sefer. Welcome back. He was originally going to write a sefer, and not only was he going to, but he actually did write a sefer that is similar to the Beis Yosef, incorporating all of the opinions in halacha until his time. And then when he reached Hilchos Chala in Yerideh, he was also interestingly doing it on the Tur, even though there's other Sfarim that are similar to the Tur. There's a sefer called Orchos Chaim. But, the Tur was a popular sefer, and he was going to use the Tur, and he already wrote his sefer on the Tur of Hilchos Chala. And then he saw that the Rebbe Yosef Karo had come out with his Beis Yosef. And, of course, he was quite upset that he put on all this effort, and it's all for nothing, and what's going to be. Anyway, but he thought about it for a while, and he realized that there's still something for him to accomplish. Because a few things. He says, first of all, he's going to give you in brief what the Beis Yosef says at length. This is on the Sefer Darkei Moshe, which is like a commentary on the Torah as well. Second of all, he's going to include opinions that the Beis Yosef did not include, which are some truths of the Goinim, maybe the Beis Yosef didn't have them, as well as other Achronim that he didn't see. For example, Marivail and the Isser V'Heter. And then also, and this is the major reason, and in this he disagrees with the system of Psak that the Beis Yosef has, because the Beis Yosef follows the three main pillars, whereas he says you're supposed to follow the later Achronim, Hilchos Kebasroi. I mean, they're not Achronim, they're the Achronim of the Rishonim, the later opinions of that era. Because it's actually a rule in the Gemara that the halacha should follow the later opinion. And the reason for that is because the later opinion knew the earlier opinions, took them into account, and if they argued, they must have had a reason for arguing. So therefore, he gives a primary opinion to the Maram Rottenberg, who was later, but also, like I mentioned earlier, he gives a primary opinion to Tosfos, because that was the Ashkenazic tradition to accept the opinion of Tosfos. So that's another reason that he wrote his sefer. And he writes that everything that he gives you his source, and if it's his own, he says nearly, so that you can know that you don't have to accept it; it's his own opinion. The later poskim, the Maharil, Trumas Hadeshen, who was also a student of the Maharam, by the way, the Maharik, the Rivosh, the Isser V'Heter, and Bnei Yerucham. Okay. And then, following the Darkei Moshe on the Torah, he also wrote hagois, the notes on the Shulchan Aruch, similar to what he did for the tour, which is so that Ashkenazim should have the halacha whenever it differs from the Sfardim, based on the later Rishonim and on the opinions of the Balei Tosfos. And he called that the mappa, the tablecloth. So the Shulchan Aruch is the table, and his sefer is like the tablecloth. Right. After that, we have many halachas form written as commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. We're going to focus now on the ones on Orach Chaim, because we're learning. That's what we're learning. Hilchos Shabbos written in Orach Chaim. So first of all, we have the Taz written by Reb David Halevi, somewhere in Europe. I don't know. He wandered around. Actually, had a difficult life. The Taz is actually unique in that he wrote a pirush on all 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. Most of the commentaries, they focus on 1 or 2 sections, but he managed to write on all of the Shulchan Aruch, so that was clearly something very special. And he's a very important opinion. He's printed pretty much in every major edition of the Shulchan Aruch. And then you have the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram, Reb Avram Abeli of Gambiner was actually his last name, and his pirushes also became very accepted, very deep, but also very terse. Like he writes very short. He just says, "Look here," and "Look there," and stuff like that. But every time he tells you to look somewhere, he's not just telling you for your information. He's telling you because if you see over there, you'll understand a certain thing, a certain halacha, and so on. So because he writes in this style, so you have many mefarshim who try to, figure him out and explain what he is meaning. The primary one is called the Machzis HaShekel, and that he goes, pretty much line by line of the Magen Avram, taking them apart and explaining what he means. When he quotes this source, when he quotes that source, what is he trying to say? Another important pirush on the Magen Avram and on the Taz actually is the Pri Megadim. I think Rabbi Yosef Tu'umim was his name. Also very significant opinion in halacha. And there are others, but I'm not remembering all their names. We have the Dagal Mervava, written by the Noida Yehuda. We have the Sefer Oilas Shabbos, written by Shmuel ben Yosef of Krakow. And the Oilas Shabbos came out after the Magen Avram had already written his Sefer, but before it was printed. And the Magen Avram disagreed with the Oilas Shabbos about so many things that he went over his entire Sefer and added notes wherever he disagreed with the Oilas Shabbos. That is a common refrain in the Magen Avram, and it's Deloi, Dala Lamed Aleph, Kaf Ayin Vav Shin, Deloi ka Oilas Shabbos. Like I'll give a whole explanation, and I'll say, by the way, this is not like the Oilas Shabbos. And he's very down on the Oilas Shabbos, but the Oilas Shabbos is nevertheless a significant achron, except that the Magen Avram very often disagreed with him. Of course, we have the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon wrote a Bir Hagra. He didn't actually, I don't know if he actually wrote it as a sefer for publication, but he simply wrote it on his Shulchan Aruch, on the side of his Shulchan Aruch, and it was printed after he passed away. A very important source of halacha for Ashkenazim. Okay, then we have the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi. He was a chassid of the Maggid of Mizrich. And the Maggid of Mizrich tasked him with writing a Shulchan Aruch, because he felt that since the original Shulchan Aruch had been written, so about 200 years had passed, and there were so many opinions. Once again, you have the Gemara, and then the opinions all blossomed out, and then the Shulchan Aruch brings it together. But by his time already, the opinions had blossomed out. And it was very difficult to come to a halacha l'maisa because you have so many opinions. You have to learn the opinions, and what is a machlokes? Who do you paskin like, and so on. So the Maggid of Mizrich asked the Alter Rebbe, chose the Alter Rebbe from amongst his 120 students, and asked him to write a Shulchan Aruch, which he did. Was given a haskama from the 2 brothers. There were 2 famous brothers, also students of the Maggid, Reb Shmuel Shmelka of Nikolsburg, Horowitz, and they saw it, they liked it, and so on. and he wrote it, and some parts of it he went over later when he was older, rewrote it. Yes. I don't know what Shmuel Shmelka's last name was. Shmuel Shmelka is two first names. Of Nikolsburg means he was in the city of Nikolsburg. I don't know what his last name was. But in those days, it was just the beginning of last names. Not everybody even had a last name. You know what I mean? Just the beginning. Anyway, so the Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch that we have on Orach Chaim. Some parts of it were lost, unfortunately. There were fires, so we don't have all of it. And there were parts of it on Yerodea that were lost as well. Even Ezer, Choshen Mishpat, he wrote more of a kitzer, like a small form of Shulchan Aruch, not following every simon. So that is another major source of halacha, especially for Hasidim, especially for Chabad Hasidim, and so on. And now something a little bit unique about the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, I may have mentioned this in the past, is that the Alter Rebbe brings halacha with reasons. So if you learn the Shulchan Aruch, there's no reason given. To know the reason, you have to look in the either in the Beis Yosef, which is the source, or in the Mefarshim who quote the reasons. But the Alter Rebbe follows the style of the Levush. The Levush was Rab Mordechai Yafi, and he wrote a sefer similar to the Shulchan Aruch, except that he incorporated the reasons into the halacha. The Aruch HaShulchan, by the way, also follows the same style. If you ever look in the Aruch HaShulchan, he quotes the Gemara, and then the Rishonim, and then he gives you the halacha. So that's something the Alter Rebbe did as well. He gives you the reasons for the halacha, and that is actually based on the Rosh, who argues in the Rambam. The Rambam wrote a whole sefer of halacha without giving reasons. And the Rosh says you can't paskin from a sefer that doesn't give reasons. And that's why he wrote the Rosh, which goes through the Gemara and the sources and so on. So the Alter Rebbe tried to incorporate the idea of the Rosh into his Shulchan Aruch. And that's why you have the halacha with reasons in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Then you have other Achronim that also wrote Sfarim and Halacha, the Chachmas Adam, Chaye Adam, Rabbi Avraham of Danzig, a student of the Vilna Gaon, an important sefer, Rabbi Kiva Eger, the Chassam Sofer, Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe's grandson, and we skip ahead to the Chafetz Chaim, of course, Rabbi Shlomo Meir Kagan of Radin, who wrote the Chafetz Chaim, and of course the Mishnah Berurah. And the Mishnah Berurah, once again, takes again into account all of the opinions that came up since the Alter Rebbe, including the Alter Rebbe, and brings it all together into the Sefer of the Mishnah Berurah. The difference in style between the Mishnah Berurah and the Alter Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe wrote a Sefer that is a standalone Sefer. It doesn't have like a top and bottom. I mean, it does have a bottom of the Alter Rebbe himself when he gives like background information, but the main source is just the top. In the Mishnah Berurah, it's a pirush on the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo. So you learn the Shulchan Aruch with the Ramah, and then the Mishnah Berurah gives you explanations and opinions and so on. So we also have the Ketzos HaShulchan, who's a very important sefer in Hilchos Shabbos, Rabbi Avraham Chaim Noah, the Chazan Ish, also very important in halacha. And then in our times, we have Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Of course, everybody knows of him. Passed really recently. Shem Shtav Aliyah. And he wrote many Sfarim. And his son wrote the Sefer Yalkut Yosef, which is, much easier to use than his father's Sfarim, which go, in great length. So I'm also going to make use of a Sefer called Shabbos Kahalacha, which is written by Rav Farkash of Yerushalayim, which clarifies a lot of the opinions of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. All right, is there anything else that I missed out on here? A little bit from the introduction that the Mittler Rebbe, the son of the Alter Rebbe, wrote on his Shulchan Aruch, just for you all to know, in case you are looking for a Seder Halimud, what is the best way to learn halacha. So he says the best way is to learn the Gemara that relates to the halacha with the Tosfos. Focus on the Rosh and review his psakim. Learn the Tur several times, the Beis Yosef 2 or 3 times, the psakim of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah several times, and then the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch with the Kuntras Acharon 2 or 3 times until you know the reasons well, which of course includes the psakim of the Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch. If you don't have time for all that, then do the Rif with Rashi, do the Rosh 2 or 3 times, and do the Shulchan Aruch and then the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So that's the short version. All right. Here are some of the rules of the Alter Rebbe. There's many rules, but just some of them that I found worthy to explain. The Alter Rebbe sometimes says a Baal Nefesh should be Machmir, a master of his soul, and sometimes he says a Yirei Shamayim will be Machmir, a God-fearing person. So a Baal Nefesh is a high-level person, and it's not necessarily for everybody to do. You can if you want. But a Yirei Shamayim is something that everybody should aspire to be, a God-fearing person. So if the Alter Rebbe recommends that a God-fearing person does it, it's not an absolute halacha. It's not that you have to, because if you would have to, it wouldn't say Yirei Shamayim. It would say, that's the halacha. But it's a proper thing. It's a good thing for people to be machmir on that. The Alter Rebbe style is not really to make chidushim in halacha. It's more to bring the opinions and to paskin like one of the opinions. Very rarely does he bring his own chiddush. That is also similar in style to the Rambam. Very rarely in the Rambam do you see v'yira li. Sometimes, but I think less than 10 times in the whole Rambam. It's rather based on what he felt the Gemara to mean or the other opinions. The Alter Rebbe relied very strongly on the Magen Avram. His main source in the Achronim was the Magen Avram, to the extent that later on, when he got older, he regretted it. And he felt that maybe he gave too much credence to the Magen Avram. And the Sfarim that he wrote later on in his life reflect that. For example, the Seder Birchas Hanenin, which is, according to our syllabus, should be next. There he wrote he based a lot of his opinions on Rishonim that differed from the Magen Avram. So he went back to the Rishonim often. But anyway, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, you'll sometimes find parentheses. And when there's a parentheses, it means that was not a clear thing to him. It wasn't clear. He had a doubt about it. He left it to be clarified further. And as I said, some sections he went over again later, and most of them he did not. So those parentheses still are kind of in doubt. Okay, a little bit from the introduction of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, of course, we know it's important to learn halacha every day. Kol hashayin halachas b'chol yoyim is meretz elam haba. The most important areas of halacha to learn is Orach Chaim, because that's most practical for us. It's difficult to learn Beis Yosef, brings in so many opinions, and therefore he wrote a sefer that would be easy to learn, and also easy to know how to paskin based on all of the different opinions. All right, so that was handout number 1. Whoever's email I don't have should please give me their emails after the class so I can email that to you. All right, and here goes Introduction to Hilchos Shabbos. And this is from the introduction of the Mishnah Berurah on Hilchos Shabbos. Just a little bit of inspirational words before we get to the halachic aspects of it. The Mishnah Berurah wrote his sefer in 6 sections, so he printed them at separate times, and he wrote separate introductions. So in his introduction to Hilchos Shabbos, the Mishnah Berurah points out that keeping Shabbos is, of course, a tremendous foundation of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism. The Gemara says whoever keeps Shabbos, it's as if he's keeping the whole Torah. Whoever desecrates Shabbos is as if he's denying the whole Torah. Because a person who keeps Shabbos, it means that he's basically agreeing that Hashem created the world and rested on the seventh day. And if he doesn't keep it, then he's denying that. Of course, a person can say, well, I believe it, but I'm just not doing it. Well, that's the same as not believing it. A person who says, I believe it, but I'm not doing it, it's like not believing it. Like, if you believe something is poison, you don't drink it. Drink it, you say, I believe it, I'm just drinking it. You obviously don't believe it. That goes without saying. So a person who doesn't keep Shabbos, it means that he doesn't practically believe in a practical way that Hashem created the world, or that Hashem cares that we should believe that he created the world. So that's why it's such an important fundamental belief, because Hashem's creating the world means that we therefore have to serve him. He created us, and he created us for a mission to serve him. So this is expressed in the Medrash, where it quotes a pasuk in Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Each of them say that keeping Shabbos is equivalent to the entire Torah. It says in Parshas Beshalach, Ad Moshe me'antem lishma mitzvosei v'seirosai. How long will you refuse to keep my mitzvahs and my Torah? And then it talks about Shabbos. So that's talking about Shabbos, refusing to keep all of the mitzvahs and the Torah. In Nevi'im it says, Vayamru, the Bnei Yisrael rebelled, they didn't go in my chukim. They desecrated the Shabbos, so that's one of the same. And in Nehemiah it says, you came down at Har Sinai, you spoke to them, the Shabbos got Shachaydat, let me told them the Torah. So that means that Har Sinai was for Shabbos. So that's like the mainstay of the Torah. We find something unique when it comes to Shabbos that we don't find almost by any other mitzvahs, and that is the concept that a person who does not keep Shabbos, who publicly, flagrantly violates the Shabbos, is considered, for all practical purposes, like a Gentile. Doesn't count for a minyan, is not a kosher witness, and so on and so forth. And this is unique. I mean, of course, a person who's an idolater is also like that. But basically, it turns out that not keeping Shabbos is almost like idolatry, because it's like not believing in Hashem. And which is also, it also explains why Shabbos, not keeping Shabbos, the punishment for that is skila, which is the most severe of all of the punishments that a Beis Din can mete out. Skila is the most severe, death by stoning. And if you look at all of the other averas for which a person gets skila, if you look at all of them, they're all related to avodah zarah somehow. Actual avodah zarah, or blasphemy, birchas Hashem, or other averas relating to avodah zarah. And Shabbos is also there because it's similar to avodah zarah in that sense. That being said, I just mentioned it. Somebody just asked me outside, actually. It's not so simple that a person who desecrates the Shabbos today is considered like an Oived Avodah Zarah. A lot of people were brought up, not being religious, so we can't blame them. And there are people who they don't keep Shabbos, but they would like to keep Shabbos. You know what I mean? They're like on the borderline. And to be considered like actually not Jewish in terms of all these halachas, it means a person who flagrantly does not keep Shabbos. Which Rabbi Weberman once said, that means that he would drive up in front of the shul and park in front of the shul and walk in. A person who parks around the block and walks in, that means he's embarrassed. So then he doesn't go into this category. So another point he says is that every mitzvah corresponds to a certain limb in a person's body, and it represents the spiritual health of that limb. But Shabbos is considered like a general mitzvah, and it represents the person's very vitality, his very spiritual vitality. The Gemara says, whoever keeps Shabbos, kahalacha, is forgiven for all his sins. What does it mean, kahalacha? It means that to keep Shabbos, you actually have to know the halacha. If you don't know the halacha, it's impossible to keep Shabbos, because there are so many details of it, and a lot of them are counterintuitive. You wouldn't realize it unless you learn it. So, for example, he says, you have your chickens, and they escape. And rather than they had chickens, Here they don't have so many chickens, but whatever. Your chickens escape. So, al pi halacha, if your chickens are not yet domesticated, they don't naturally come back to roost at night, you're not allowed to chase them back into their pen. That's an isser of tzeda. It's a Torah violation of trapping. And even to get a Gentile to do it for you is not allowed. So the only way you could do it is a shvus to shvus. We're going to learn about that, where it's a double rabbinic violation. So to get a Gentile to push, to nudge them into an area that is not so small, where you still have to run again to trap them again. So that's a rabbinic violation. So it's a double rabbinic violation. So these are details that you would never figure out on your own. Another example, a small fire starts on your table. So a person gets all nervous, what's he going to do? Sometimes, chas v'shalom, he might just put it out because he wants to save his house without thinking. And really, there's a permissible way to put it out, and that is by surrounding the fire with water, so that you're not actually putting it out, but that the fire cannot spread. So if a person just learns the halacha, he can accomplish saving himself, to save a life, you put out the fire anyway. But he can save his property without actually desecrating the Shabbos, chas v'shalom. Or he can call a non-Jew to put it out. Now there's a way to do it. You can't tell him directly. You tell him he won't lose if he puts it out, whatever. But that a person has to learn in order to know how to do that. Another example is the Isser of Boyer, right? A lot of details in the Isser of Boyer. The same action sometimes is permissible and sometimes is a chiyuv chata, sometimes is a Torah violation. Like if you're doing it for immediate use, you can take the good from the bad. And if you're doing it for using it later, it could be an actual Torah violation. Or let's say you take the good, but you leave over a little bit. You know what I mean? So it's not simple. Or you take the bad. Let's say you take the bad, but you leave over a little bit, still mixed in. Different ways. Same thing with Bishul, with Shehiyah, with Atmana, which we're going to learn now. All of these things have so many details, impossible to know them without learning them. And like Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshit says, he quotes him, it is impossible to be saved from violating the Shabbos if you don't learn the halach properly. And therefore, he says, I wrote this sefer because the halachas are difficult. And if you don't have a sefer that brings it all together, it can be difficult to know the halach. So here it is. And the Mishnah Berurah recommends that these halachas be learned publicly and be reviewed, and in this merit we will merit Mashiach. All right. Now we have another introduction. And this is the introduction of the Pri Megadim. Thank you very much. The Pri Megadim wrote an introduction to different areas in halacha. And in those introductions, he often brings important aspects of those halachas that are good to know. So we're not going to go through all of it because it's quite lengthy, but we'll just mention some points that he mentions before we actually start learning what we're going to be learning. So everybody knows that there's avos and tuldos, right? 39 avos malachas. That means we learn from the different activities involved in building the Mishkan as to what we're not allowed to do. And the Mishnah says that there are 39 of those malachas. The Av malacha is what they actually did in the Mishkan, right? Av is the father. And the Tulda, the secondary malacha, is something similar to what they did in the Mishkan. Now the Rambam says that the Av can include things that are somewhat different, but as long as the content is the same, it'll still be considered an Av. So for example, the Rambam says that planting, whether you're planting a vegetable or a grain or a tree, is all included in the Av Malach. It's also a Reya. Even though one is little, one is big, but that doesn't make a difference. And the same thing for Hoitzah and Achnasa, carrying in, carrying out. Even if they did only one in the Mishkan, but they're practically the same. They accomplish more or less the same. And therefore they're considered both avos malachas. Now, a tulda is something that is different, yet it has the same underlying theme. So, for example, making cheese is very different than building a house. Nevertheless, the Gemara says that it's an av malacha considered boina. Because what do you do when you build something? You bring together different things and make it into one. So when you make cheese, you're taking the milk and whatever other ingredients and you're building it to become one solid thing. So there you see how the tulda can be something totally different than the av, yet it's considered that av because it's accomplishing the same common denominator, even though the way it's done could be very different. So what's the practical difference of knowing that there are 39, there are avos, there are tuldas? What's the difference? You just know what's forbidden. Who cares where it comes from? So of course, first of all, it's because that's how the Chachamim know them. I mean, we know them because the Chachamim told it to us. But how did they know? How did they know it? They learned it from the Mishkan, and then they learned the some categories from using their own logic to extend it. But in terms of halacha lamaisa, the practical application is as follows: a person who knows that it's Shabbos, but forgets that something is forbidden, and he does multiple sins, multiple things that are forbidden. So if it was in one helam, that means one state of forgetfulness, he would have to bring in the time of the Beis Hamikdash one korban chatas, one sin offering for every av melacha. But if he did the same av melacha many times, or for that matter, many tuldas of the same av, or the tulda and the av, or whatever it is, he would only bring one korban chatas. So what's the difference today, says the Pri Megadim? We don't have the korban chatas. Well, we still have the idea of redeeming a korban chatas. If a person sins on Shabbos in a way that he would have to bring a korban chatas on top of the Beis Hamikdash, he is supposed to bring a certain amount of money to atone, like to redeem that korban, and therefore she has to know the av and the tulda and how many sacrifices he would have had to bring, and therefore how much tzedakah he has to give. So that's an interesting thing. Okay. Now we know most of the malachas and Shabbos, in order to transgress them in a way that a person would be liable for punishment, the word for that in Hebrew is chayav, he would be liable for punishment, is only if he does a certain amount. Because in order to transgress, it has to be that he accomplished something with his action. If what he did is not considered a significant accomplishment, then he's not chayav, right? Because it's similar to the Mishkan. In the Mishkan, they worked in a way that accomplished, that actually got something done. So a person that would do something that's a very small amount in such a way that it's not considered significant is not going to be punished. So, for example, a person who carries out on Shabbos, obviously without an Eruv, so if he carries such a small amount of something that it has no use, so he's not going to be chayiv. He carries out a tiny piece of paper. Not going to be chayav. He has to take out a paper that he can write at least something on. If he carries out food, it has to be a certain amount of food that's important, and so on. Every single malacha has a shear, with, I think, 2 or 3 exceptions that he quotes. For example, building has no shear. Charisha has no shear. I think that's it. But everything else has a shear. I'm sorry?
What is Charisha?
Bayer, in general, he says when it comes to food, it's a shear of a gregris. A gregris is a dry date, if I'm not mistaken.
I think threshing.
But that's only for punishment. Sorry? It's bigger than a kazayis, smaller than a kibetza. No, less than a kibetza, less than a kibetza. So the thing is that this does not mean that a person who does a chatzi shear means a half of a measurement or any amount less than the full shear. And that doesn't mean that it's only a rabbinic violation. It's an actual Torah violation. It's just that he doesn't get punished. That is an important rule. Chatzi shear asam minatayr. A person who does a half a shear is asam minatayr. Half a shear, for example, he cooks, but he cooks less than that amount, less than a gregors, less than a dry date. So that's a Torah violation, but there is no punishment.
The intention is anything, or the intention is actually half of what it
No,
is?
anything. Now, the Pri Megadim differentiates between this and a person who does not complete the malacha. The person does not complete the malacha, did not do a chatzi shir. That means to transgress on cooking, a person would have to cook to the point that it's edible, the size of a half a date, let's say. He's not going to get punished, but it's a Torah transgression because he made it edible. Whereas if you would take even a whole date and only make it half edible, I mean that it's not even edible for a robber who's in a rush or whatever, then that's not a Torah violation. It's not allowed, but it's not a Torah violation. So that's why, for example, we say that in some extreme cases, not a usual case, but in some extreme cases, a person is even allowed to carry less than 4 amas in a Rishus Harabah and stop, and then continue, and then stop, and then continue. Basically, if he's walking before Shabbos and he has his wallet, and he has no donkey to put it on, there's no Gentile, there's no child, and it's a lot of money. So the Chachamim knew that if they wouldn't let him, they wouldn't give him a way out, he might transgress and just carry it home. So they said carry it less than 4 amas at a time. Now, if that would be a Torah violation, they wouldn't be authorized to allow it. But it's only a rabbinic violation because it's not a chatzi shir, because it's a half a malacha. It's called chatzi malacha. It's not chatzi shir, it's chatzi malacha. So that's a rabbinic violation, and that's why they were able to be lenient.
Would a bomb that fish be not there, or because the Chachamim said it's mutter for everyone?
It's mutter for everyone. It's mutter. Okay. He questions, what if you do a half a shear in the morning, you do another half a shear in the afternoon? So it's not like when it comes to eating, you have to eat within a certain amount of time for it to count, like with the matzah. Here it's not like that. As long as the item still exists in the world that you did in the morning, you're still chayiv if you finish in the afternoon. Maybe even if it's not in the world, that he's not sure about. All right. Very good. With no further ado, we are going to give a final introduction, and that is on the simon that we're actually going to learn. So, what I had originally planned is just to learn the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch inside, and to give you the rest of the opinions outside. But based on Rafal's encouragement, we are going to start with the Shulchan Aruch of the Machaber and Ramah. Thank you very much. And then I'm going to go to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, but add another, whatever else I have to add to that. The Alter Rebbe does give the reasons, so that is very helpful. So in terms of what's safer to buy, in general, the Mishnah Berurah has been translated into English. You can buy that because it will have the Machaber and Ramah Shulchan Aruch Hebrew and English, as well as the Mishnah Berurah himself in English. Shulchan Aruch Harav, thank you, if I can borrow this for a second, is also available recently. So this is very helpful. Anybody who needs a link to it, I can send you a link to be able to buy it.
So those two together should be
Those
Mishnah Berurah.
Those are a good start. Those are a good start. Actually, if people want to save on the shipping, if you want, we can do it as a group. And whoever wants can tell me that they want it, and I'll order it and pay me back or whatever. It's a good book. It's a good book. I find it more helpful for testing than for learning, but it's a good book. So another excellent sefer that I recommend is called The 39 Malachas by David Ribiat.
The 3 volumes.
It's 3 volumes exactly, and he goes through all of the 39, and he gives you practical halacha, practical halacha for today. Not everything in the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe and Mishnah Berurah are practical, because they were written in Europe when it was a different lifestyle. So he brings it very much down to practical halacha of today. I'm not going to use it as a text that we actually learn from, but it is an excellent sefer that you can use on your own and use it to supplement what we're learning. All right, so the title of the siman that we're going to be learning first is called Siman Reish Nun Gimel 253, and it is Din Kira V'Tana Litna Le'Hakderes Be'erev Shabbos. It's the halacha about putting pots on a stove or an oven from before Shabbos. It's basically the halachas of shehiyah and chazara. Shehiyah means to leave food on a heat source from before Shabbos. Chazara means to be able to return the food on that heat source. So this, in the order of the Shulchan Aruch, this simply comes first because it happens on Friday. The prohibited things of Shabbos happen on Shabbos, but this happens on Friday. Now there are other sections before this in the Shulchan Aruch that we're not going to learn. We can't get through everything. Of course, it's a good thing for a person to learn on their own, but maybe we'll come back to some of it in terms of Amir the Nachri, forbidden what you can't tell a goy to do. But this is where we're going to start. So basically, the issue is that there was a concern that if a person has food on a heat source from before Shabbos, there's a concern that he may be mechata b'gechalim. He may stoke the coals of that heat source. The coals were the major way they heated in those days. He may stoke the coals to be able to keep it hot and cook it and so on and so forth. So in reference to this, there is a machlokes of Hananya and the Chachamim. Hananya is one of the Tanoim, and the Chachamim were the Chachamim that his contemporaries who disagreed with him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the Mishnayos, which are the source for this discussion. One of them is found in Shabbos Yud Tesam Beis. So I'll just say it in the Hebrew and the English, and I'll explain how it is relevant for this. So the Mishnah says, this is all in the handout that I sent out, and whoever doesn't have it will get it later. It's Hashem. So the Mishnah says, Ein soilin basar batzal ubeitza elikadeshi yitzoilim b'od yoyim. It is forbidden to roast meat or onions or an egg unless it will be cooked while it's still day. Now, the reason for this, by the way, is not that your oven is not allowed to do work for you, right? Your oven is allowed to do work for you. Your kalim are allowed to do work for you. There is an opinion, and that is the opinion of Beis Shammai, that holds of Shvisas kalim. Beis Shammai holds your stuff cannot work for you, just like your animal cannot work for you. That's in the Aseret Adibros. So he holds your pots and pans cannot do work for you. Your candles can't work for you. Shabbos is very complicated according to Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, in order to be able to light Shabbos candles, you have to declare them hefker, because otherwise your candles are working for you. No, I'm serious. No, it's not that you're not doing the mitzvah. It's that you're doing an avera.
So you can't fulfill the mitzvah.
Exactly. If they were yours, you wouldn't be allowed to use them. You have to declare them hefker and then light them. So that's what it is. We don't paskin like Beis Shammai. We paskin that you are allowed, that your possessions can work for you on Shabbos. You are the one that can't do work. But your possessions can do work, it's no problem. So, your computer, very practical today. People have websites, whatever. Money can come in. I mean, there's many Schar Shabbos. There are related issues with making money on Shabbos, but the fact that it's working per se is not attributed to you. It's not considered that you are working because it's a machine. It's not you. On the other hand, there is a fear that the individual may see the food and see that it's not getting ready fast enough and stoke the coals. So it has to be cooked before Shabbos. Here's a very important halach, which is the source of Hananiah's opinion. You cannot put bread in the oven as it's getting dark, nor a wafer on the coals, unless it will form a crust before Shabbos begins. And the Gemara says, when it forms a crust, it's actually not fully baked. Forming the crust is only edible for a robber who is in a very big rush and he doesn't have time to wait for his food to get ready.
Ben Drosai?
Exactly. This is the famous robber whose name was Ben Drusoi. And it's called Kamichael Ben Drusoi, something that is edible like that robber named Ben Drusoi. So the point is that the fact that the Mishnah does not say that it has to be fully ready, it rather just says that it has to form a crust. The Gemara says that based on this, we know that this is the opinion of Hananiah, who says that once a food is edible, Kamichael Ben Drusoi, like this bandit would eat it, which is a machlokes, by the way, between Rashi and the Rambam. Rashi says it's 1/3 cooked, and the Rambam says it's 1/2 cooked. So once it reaches that stage, he is not concerned that you are going to stoke the coals. I'm sorry? And the reason for that is twofold. First of all, because it's already edible. So even if it doesn't get ready, any more ready than it is, it's nishka freilach, it's not the end of the world. You can eat it. You can even serve it to your guests. That's first of all. And second of all, since it is halfway cooked, it's almost fully cooked. So even if your guests prefer fully cooked, it's going to happen soon anyway. So you're not going to be so nervous about it. Yes?
So you said, and I'm just asking something I've never actually done. If you were to leave an uncooked meat on your...
Totally uncooked?
Completely uncooked.
Yeah.
On a timer. You don't eat it on Shabbos. If it worked for you.
Timers are complicated on Shabbos, and many poskim hold that you cannot use it for cooking. Even though we use timers for other things, but many poskim say not to use it for cooking. So...
What if you left it in the sun?
The sun is a machaya.
That comes up.
You can cook in the sun. On Shabbos, not even from before Shabbos, you can actually cook in the sun. You can fry an egg in the sunlight and eat it. We'll get to that in Shin Yud Ches in 318. Okay, so...
Miami, it's easy.
Yeah.
It's exclusive to Miami, that type of cooking.
Yeah, Miami and other tropical places. All right, let's skip ahead to the beginning of the third chapter of Shabbos, which is 36b. And I'm going to read the Mishnah once again. I'll say it in Hebrew and translate it to English. And this is the major source for our simon. Kira shehisikuha bikash uvigvava. A kira, now we have to define what a kira is. A kira is basically a rectangular type of stove. So it was basically made of probably stones with cement, and there was coals at the bottom of it. You could either hang pots over the walls, or you could actually put pots inside at the bottom of them. And we're going to, maybe I'll track down a picture of that and send it out later. Anyway, just for your information, they discuss 3 types of cooking utensils in this simon. The kira, which is what I just described. Then there's something called a kupach, which is similar except that it's square instead of rectangular. So it has room not for 2 pots on top of it, but for 1 pot. And it retains its heat better than the kupach because it's smaller. And then you have something called a tanur, which in modern Hebrew is an oven, but I mean, kir is also an oven. But the point of the tanur is that it was wider on the bottom and narrower on the top, and therefore it kept heat even better than the kir. So those are the three types. So the first Mishnah in this chapter discusses the kir. So if you heated it with kash and gevava, these are basically heat sources that burn, fuels that burn very quickly, straw and stubble. So on such an item, on such a fuel, you could put anything; it's no problem because it's going to burn out so quickly. It doesn't really make a difference if you stoke those coals because they're gone so quick. However, if you use gefes and eitzim, if you use wood, or gefes is what's after you crush olives, you're left with like the junk at the bottom. So that has substance to it, the pits and the other flesh, the oil, whatever. So it has stuff it'll burn, and wood as well. So there's an issue. Lo yiten ache yigroif oyache yiten esa efer. So in order to be able to put a pot on it, a tavshil, a cooked dish, you have to either remove the coals or cover them with ashes. So removing the coals will, of course, accomplish, just one moment, that there's almost no coals to worry about, so you're not going to stoke them. Covering them with ashes is not going to put them out, but it's going to, by covering it, you're showing that you don't really care about this fire. It's not so terrible. You're cooling it off. Well, if it cooks, it cooks. If it doesn't cook, it doesn't cook. So this is similar in modern days. This is similar to what we call a blech, covering a heat source with a metal sheet. All right, we don't really have the concept of grufa, of removing the coals, because if you turn off the stove, I mean, that's it. There's nothing left, right? In those days, you could remove the coals and there would still be a little bit of coals left over, little leftovers, and it would still heat it. Nowadays, you turn it off, it's off. But if you cover it, so that's similar to the ashes. So then he says, then you're allowed to. Lo yiten, you shouldn't put anything on it unless you cover it. Okay, then we have a little machloikas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what you're allowed to put on it. If it's just hot water or also a cooked dish, Beis Hillel says also a cooked dish, that's what we follow. And Beis Hillel also says you can even put something back on these places. If you take something off on Shabbos, you can also put it back. And this is the concept chazor of returning something to a heat source. Now, there are many details and conditions to be able to do that, but that is what Beis Shammai says. Beis Hillel says, excuse me. Okay, so the Gemara tries to figure out, is the Mishnah, the way we read it, the correct version of the Mishnah? In which case, it would be the opinion of the Chachamim and not Chananya. Meaning to say, you cannot put a dish on it unless you cover it or remove the coals. Now, if Chananya were writing the Mishnah, he would say, well, as long as it's half cooked, right, or a third cooked, however you define that ben drusoi, right, the way the robber would eat, like we discussed, it would be fine to put it there without having to cover the coals, right? Like we learned in the previous Mishnah, that you can put the bread in the oven in such a way that it forms a crust before a nightfall. And that's fine. And it didn't say there that you have to cover any heat, because once it's baked to that extent, you're not worried about it. And this Mishnah seems to say it's a problem. So if we keep the Mishnah the way it's written, this represents the opinion of the Chachamim and not Chananya. However, maybe this Mishnah should be changed, and instead of it saying lo yitain, it should say lo yachzir. You cannot return. And the idea is as follows. Even though Hananya says that once something is a third cooked, you're allowed to leave it on the fire. When it comes to putting something back on a fire, there's no question that the fire has to be covered. Right? The whole thing about covering the fire perhaps is only to be able to put it back on Shabbos. But if you want to leave it there from before Shabbos, it's no problem, as long as it's half cooked or a third cooked, however you understand. So those are the two ways of understanding the Mishnah. If it should say lo yitain, as we have it, and therefore it's the opinion of the Chachamim, that you cannot put anything on a fire unless it's covered. Or if it should say lo yasi, you cannot return it. But to put it there in the first place, it's okay as long as it's half cooked. Okay, the Gemara has a long back and forth. What's the correct version? Tries to prove it this way, that way, the other way, and it does not have a clear conclusion. The only thing it does have is opinions of the Amoraim, meaning to say the different authors of the Gemara give their opinion as to how to paskin, whether like Hananya or like the Chachamim. Right? But there's no clarity what the Mishnah actually holds. But one thing that does come out of the Gemara is that even the Chachamim would agree in a case, listen very carefully, I'm going to use some Hebrew terms that are very important you become familiar with. In a case when it's nisbashal kol tzarkoi, which means it's fully cooked, and it's mitztamek vera loi. That not only is it fully cooked, but the more it cooks, the worse it gets. That means it's basically starting to burn, starting to dry out. So an example of mitztamek vera loi is water. Once the water has boiled, it doesn't get any better by cooking. All that happens is that it evaporates. That's an example of mitztamek vera loi. In terms of meat, the Gemara says, well, it depends. If you have guests, once it's fully cooked, you don't want it to cook anymore because it shrinks and you want to serve your guests a nice portion. If you're eating alone, so you don't mind that it shrinks because it gets that nice little burnt taste, the little crust and so on and so forth. So then even after it's fully cooked, it's still mitztamek v'yafale, it still tastes better. So again, the practical application of this is that if it is fully cooked, and not only is it fully cooked, but it's not getting any better by continuous cooking, then even the Chachamim agree that you're allowed to leave it on a heat source that is not covered. All right? However, if it's mitztamek v'yafaloi, as long as it is continuing to taste better, the longer it's on the fire, then the Chachamim would say you can only leave it from before Shabbos if it is covered. As long as the heat source is not covered, there's no way to leave it there. That's the opinion of the Chachamim. So in terms of who to paskin like I mentioned, we have different opinions in the Gemara. We have Rava, we have Shmuel, we have two opinions within Rav Yochanan. It's okay. The bottom line is that there is no clarity. And even in the Rishonim, we have a little bit of a lack of clarity. The Rif, for example, is strict. Rashi, on the other hand, is lenient. Rashi says the fact that we leave our stuff on the fire. Let me see if I can find it here. Va'anan, here's a quote of Rashi. Va'anan de mashinan kedera al gabe kira she'ene grufa. We leave our pots on top of stoves that are not covered. Ad chananya samchinan. We rely on chananya because we have the Mishnah in the first chapter that we learned first that is written according to his opinion. And Rav Sheshis in the name of Yechanan agreed with him. And that's it. That's the way Rashi paskins. On the other hand, the Rif is lenient. The Rif is strict. And the Rif paskins like the Chachamim against Hananya. The Rosh, after he brings the opinions back and forth, says we cannot rule on this halacha. However, the minhag is to be lenient like Hananya, and we cannot protest. So it's kind of a little bit of an ambiguous opinion. He's not saying what the halacha is for sure. He's just saying what the minhag is, and he's not protesting. So in practice, the Machaber paskins like the Rif, who is strict, perhaps bearing in mind that the Rosh also kind of doesn't give a clear leniency, whereas the Ramah is lenient, following the opinion of Rashi and the minhag quoted by the Rosh. Okay, so I'm going to read the Machaber, and I don't expect you to have it because I didn't even warn you that we were going to be learning it, but I'm going to read and translate as we go, and all right. Kira, you know what? This may be available online. Let me see. In English? No. I don't know if Sefaria has it. Yossi, David, Daniel, you're all very quiet today. What's going on? No comments, questions? Feel free. Well, yeah, for Yossi, but not for the other two. Halacha. Torah commentaries. I'm not seeing it.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for the Shulchan Aruch in English, but I don't see it here. Shulchan Aruch. Aruch Chaim. Oh, no.
Any ways to go?
I don't think they have it in English now.
Yeah, no.
No. Okay, I don't think it's available in English, but if you want, Lama? No. Odmat. Okay, so it is in English. In Hebrew, I mean, if you go to sefaria.org, they have in Hebrew. Sorry, I don't know if it's available in English.
Shulchan
Aruch.
It's not.
I don't think they have it in English online.
Or Chaim.
Okay, but in terms of they do have a book of it translated, the Mishnah Berurah, which has the Shulchan Aruch on top of it.
Yeah, you found it.
In English?
Yeah.
Where?
Shulchan Aruch. SHULCHANARACH.
Where's Wi-Fi here, by the way?
Shulchan Aruch online. Free English translation.
253. It's here. The laws of putting pots on single and double stoves on the Sabbath. All right. Very good. Nice. ShulchanAruch.com. What's the Wi-Fi here? Moshe, what's the Wi-Fi?
It's the fax number.
Yeah.
Anybody want the Wi-Fi?
Which one is it? 2.4.
305 935 4155. The fax number.
2.4.
You got it? 305 935 4155.
All right. Very good. Kiro shiasuya kikedera. V'soifsen al pia keder l'mayla. V'yesh ba makam sfisas shtei keteros. So first, the Shulchan Aruch, the Machaber, gives a definition of what is a kira. The definition of a double stove is a stove constructed with two openings on top where you can put two pots. If it was heated with mark, that's how they translate the word gefas, which is basically the byproducts of crushed olives. Or with wood. Also, it's forbidden to put a cooked food on it from before Shabbos. Allowed to leave it on it, unless it was fully cooked. Unless it is shrinking in such a way that it is getting worse. So this is, like I said, the opinion of the Chachamim, not like Chananya, who forbid you to leave anything on an open flame unless it's fully cooked and diminishing in taste. Because in that case, nobody's going to stoke the coals. Once, it's reached that stage, you don't want it to cook any faster because it's basically burning. Okay, now here's another exception that we didn't learn till now. Listen carefully. Oy shahoyachai shaloines bashal klal, or if it was raw and it was not cooked at all. Okay, exception to everything we've learned so far. If you have a food that is not cooked at all, most of the places can hold it has to be meat, although the Rambam says it can be other foods. But the point is, it's going to take so long to cook that it's not going to be ready anyway for the guests. Even if you would stoke those coals, it's not going to be ready for the guests because it takes too long. It's not going to be ready until the next day. And by the next day, you don't have to stoke the coals for that because it's going to be ready for sure, no problem. So that is the heter of basar chai, of raw meat. And as we're going to see later, even if you don't have a whole pot of raw meat, even if you have a pot that's, half cooked or third cooked or even less, but you throw in one piece of raw meat, so you're not going to serve a pot that has uncooked stuff in it. You're going to wait until it's fully cooked, and that's going to take too long. It's not going to be ready for the guests anyway, even if you stoke, so you're not going to bother stoking. That is the concept of raw. The kevon. With an open fire, that's correct.
So you can't benefit the good from the bad?
You're not going to benefit while it's bad. You're not going to eat it until the next day.
No, but what if you ate the vegetables and left the raw meat in the pot?
People don't do that. If you're like a caveman, maybe. Or maybe Ben Versoy himself would do that. But normally you have a dish that's cooking. You wait till it's cooked. That's it. You don't pick out bits and pieces.
So what if you made your soup and then you wanted to the other way around? You wanted to add vegetables. So you ate the meat today and the vegetables tomorrow.
Well, according to most poskim, this only works for meat because other things cook fast. The Rambam holds that it works for other things also, and according to him, as long as anything in there is raw, is okay. I guess according to him, the idea is that it's not necessarily that it takes so long to cook, but it shows your intent. By specifically going out of your way and putting something raw in, you're showing that your intent is to have it for the next day, and that's enough. That's what it would seem. Yeah.
Wouldn't they be scared if you're putting, let's say, for example, it's a quarter cooked, you're not allowed to leave it on the fire? Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't they be scared that if you're going to put a raw piece, then it would be 25% not cooked? Meaning when something becomes ready, the whole pot becomes ready, this is 75% cooked, and you're worried that the entire dish is going to be 125% cooked, overcooked, until then that piece comes to ready. And then you would make sense.
Well, what are you going to do about it? You're going to take it off? You can take things off on Shabbos. It's no problem. Yichat is going to make it more. You're saying you don't want to make it less. It's going to get overcooked. They weren't concerned with making it less. I've never come across that concern. Even though you could, it could happen. Foods could burn.
Meaning
but that's
the most that can be done is just leave off.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't come across that concept that it might burn. Although I understand there is such a maybe, but I don't think the Chacham were concerned about it. It's not so common.
You said it's fine. You just take it off.
Yeah. Okay, the Kemet Shu Chai, since it's Ro Masiach, Daite Mimena Ad Lamocha, he will remove his mind from it until the next day. And throughout the night, it can cook without being stoked. Avon is special ktsas. Within a special called tzorka. However, if it was somewhat cooked but not fully cooked, vafilin is special called tzorka. Even if it was fully cooked, but it's continuing to taste better as it's cooked, like a cholent often does. Chayshina neshema yechata. We are concerned that he might stoke the coals. He's not allowed to leave it. Ela imkain garaf, unless he removed the coals. That is to say, he removed all of the coals, which is that he covered the coals with ashes to minimize their heat. While we're learning this, I am remembering an opinion of the Brisker Rav, Velvel Soloveitchik, which is a very big chiddush, and it's not accepted in halacha, but it's a very interesting chiddush. So the way they used to cook, of course, was with coals. Nowadays we use, electric, gas. So when Velvel Brisker moved to Yerushalayim from Brisk, I guess. So he saw the way people cook, and they were using gas. It was I think it was called a Primus oven or something. Very Primus. So much more primitive than we have today, but it was connected to some kind of gas container or whatever, and that's what they would use to cook. So the first Shabbos came, and he didn't do anything to cover the flame. He left the flame with the pot on it, as is, didn't discuss it with anybody, Brisker Rav decides the halacha, and he does accordingly. Anyway, there was a big uproar in Yerushalayim about this, and the next Shabbos he kept it covered, and from then on he kept it covered, because he didn't want to make an uproar. But his reasoning was very simple. His reasoning was that the whole thing about stoking the coals is only relevant for coals, because coals die down, and if you don't stoke them from time to time, they're going to be gone. Whereas gas, unless you forgot to fill up the gas, which if you did, it's going to be too late. You don't have a spare tank. Maybe you do have a spare tank, but most people don't have a spare tank. So it's you either have gas or you don't. So there's no point in stoking it. So that's why he didn't feel it was necessary. Me'ikar hadin. But then he relented to follow the minhag. But nevertheless, the main halacha is like the minhag of everybody then and everybody now, which is that it's not just about the fact that it's dying down, it's about the fact that it may not be cooking fast enough. You may have thought that it's going to be ready, but you may actually see that it's not ready. So you left it at a temperature that you thought was enough, and it turns out it's not, and the guests are coming, and it's not ready, and in your confusion and your hurriedness to help them, you may forget that it's Shabbos and chas v'shalom change the temperature. Okay, this is what I was mentioning before. If you put a raw piece in it, mutter, it's allowed, as if the entire thing was raw. Because based on this one raw piece, you are going to remove your mind from it. Okay, here's another chiddush. I don't know how practical it is today, but in those days, you had this oven. It was very hot. You could put a pot outside of the oven, just next to the wall of the oven, in such a way that it gets heated by the oven. So if you do that, you can do it even if it's not gufro k'tuba, even if it's not covered. Because what's the whole point of covering it? To show that you don't need the heat so badly, and therefore you're not going to stoke it because you're not even, you don't care, it's covered, it's minimized. So how much more so if you don't even put it inside, you put it outside, where the wall of the oven is blocking the heat. So clearly you're not so caring that it should be so hot. So that is okay, even according to the Chacham.
So, if a person has a oven,
Uh-huh.
let's say it's a stove.
Yeah.
And he has the burner on, whether it be gas or electric,
Uh-huh.
and he wants to, it's not covered, and he wants to warm something up on Shabbat, and he put it next to it to gain the heat from it. Just not touching, but directly parallel to it.
It's cooking on, right?
No, we're talking about from before Shabbos. He's not putting it on Shabbos. From before Shabbos. Yeah.
Before Shabbat, to keep it warm.
On Shabbat or before Shabbat?
Oh, before.
Before Shabbat.
I'm not 100% sure of that, but my guess is that it's not allowed.
Why?
Because if it's close enough to the fire to make it, obviously to keep it yad soledas. Obviously, we're talking about a case where you're able to keep it yad soledas. That's an important term. Also, everybody should know yad soledas boy means that it's too hot for you to touch, right? And that's the halachic definition of cooking in Hilchos Shabbos. So if it's less than that, it's not an issue, right? But if it's that amount, so it's close enough to be considered on the fire. Understand what I'm saying? Over here, we're talking about where the oven and the coals are inside the oven, and this is outside. There's a wall in between. You understand? So it's actually outside. There, it's not directly on top of, but it's close enough, and it's a direct heat. I don't think it's allowed.
We're not getting to Yatzoledo.
I'm sorry?
I'll tell you, it's not gonna get into Yatzoledo.
Well, in this case, it is, but it's still okay.
Rabbi, why is the issue to put before Shabbat everything?
Because it's not fully cooked, and if it's not getting ready fast enough, you may change the temperature.
You're cooking.
That's what we're learning about. That's the whole simon. That's what it's about.
May change.
You may change it. Correct. Yes.
I have two questions. The first one, my pot that gets hot where I can't touch things sometimes.
Yep.
So that's not permissible.
What do you mean? I don't understand your question.
Like I can't grab whatever I put on it.
Repeat your question one more time. Your pot gets hot, but you
said
put it
that
on from before
He
Shabbos.
asked if you can put a pot next to an open flame. You said no.
I'm talking about a pot that doesn't fit the specifications of what we're learning in the simon. That means if it's not fully cooked, right, and it's getting better,
Or not.
then according to the opinion of
But you put the pot down, I'm assuming before Shabbos, or this is on Shabbos?
before Shabbos.
So then what's the problem?
If it's, well, it depends which opinion you're following.
If
If you're Sephardic,
as long as you go by that, what's the problem?
one second. If you're Sephardic, in order to be able to put it, right, following the opinion of the Mechaber, of the Shulchan Aruch, in order to put it there and with an open flame, it has to be not just fully cooked, but fully cooked and burning. It has to be drying out in such a way that it's not tasting better.
I thought it had to be 50%.
That's the
Sephardic,
Ramah.
like, well done.
That's the Ramah. That's the opinion of Hananya, which the Ramah follows. You understand? That's not the opinion of the Machab. So that will make a difference. Understand?
Rabbi, how would do the chamin?
If you cover it, then it's okay. Cover the fire. How do you do chamin? You tell me.
How you do it?
A plata.
Oh,
You got two kind of plata or the pot with the electric,
okay. A plata is a good question.
the cook pot.
And it depends if it has many different temperatures or not. If a plata has only one temperature, then it's as good as any covered flame because you cannot change the
You
flame.
cannot change.
Cannot change. Plata is like a hot plate.
Yes.
If it has only one temperature, then it's okay.
It's but if you-
Even if whether it's zero cooked or a quarter or a third or a half, it makes no difference because there's no possibility to change the flame. Understand?
It's not derech. They'll never reach that. I don't know if they can actually cook.
No, it gets to Yatzalettas, but no question.
Rabbi,
It gets to Yatzalettas, but the derech, whether it's the way to cook or not, is relevant in terms of putting food on it on Shabbos. But in terms of stoking it, that's a separate issue. If you could change the temperature, it would seem to be an issue.
and the fire and the gas, you just put some piece of metal on top.
Yeah, that's what people do.
What's the minimum?
That's- are we
I
talking
never
about
use
das?
that
because I don't trust that.
If you have a plata, you have a plata.
What's the minimum?
Sorry?
What's the minimum layer that has to be put on top?
It just had to be any layer.
No minimum.
But if it's a tinfoil?
Yeah, you put
I mean, it's better to put something thicker. It's better, but maker adin, you could be even a small amount. All right.
We could just go back to the raw. again.
Yep.
So raw is not a problem. And then, so there's this zone between raw and
Exactly.
25%, that is a
Exactly.
problem.
Exactly,
That's how we should think about
I don't know, between
Raw and Bendros.
33.33% or 50% according to the Rambam.
Right. So that Bendrosai zone, that's
Until the Bender size zone is the problem.
okay.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. All right.
It's considered raw until not 100%. Considered raw?
No,
No, you can
absolutely
either
not.
throw it in when it's raw.
Absolutely
Or
not.
you can throw it in when it's 33.3%,
No.
but not in the middle.
No, you
Not
don't
in
throw
that
it in
zone.
when it's 33%. You put it in
And then
an hour
it's-
before Shabbos in
33%,
such a way that it's 33%. The point is raw means that it's actually raw. You understand? That means that when Shabbos comes in, it hasn't even heated up to Yatzeletas boy. You understand? And 33%, that is permissible. 33% means you put it in however many, if it takes 3 hours to cook, you put it in 1 hour before. Or if you want to fulfill the Rambam's opinion, so it's an hour and a half before. But if it's in between, let's say it takes 5 minutes for it to reach Yatzeletas boy, let's say, whatever. So in between 5 minutes and an hour or an hour and a half, that's when it's a problem. You understand? So it started to cook, but it didn't reach that point that it's yet considered edible. This is all for
What's
Ashkenaz.
that crock pot? What's that crock pot? If you put in 100% raw meat a minute before Shabbat, and you put it to
Yeah, sounds good to me. Why not?
no, sounds good.
Yeah.
So what's the 1 hour before?
To get it to 33%,
I'm saying if it's
whatever it takes,
And
yeah.
just a second,
Better-
you said-
better 50%.
Raw.
if it's 0%, it's okay. It's okay. You don't need to have any cover on any flame. If it's half, then according to Ashkenazim, it's also good, or even a third b'di'evet. You understand? If it's in between, that's when it's a problem, because it's close enough that it could be ready for the nighttime meal, and you're nervous about it because it's not so ready. So you may change it. That's the issue.
And this is only for eating during the day? You're not allowed to eat this
Anytime
through
it's
the night?
Shabbos. Yeah.
No. The issue is that this food could be ready for the nighttime meal. And that's what we're concerned with. If it's specifically, clearly only for the daytime meal, then we wouldn't even be nervous about it.
That's why raw's.
That's why raw is okay, because you're not nervous about it. Exactly. There is an opinion that the Beis Yosef brings, but he says it's not the main halacha, that it doesn't even have to be raw. It could just be that you decide in your mind, this is for tomorrow. That's it. It could be no matter what level of cooking, just deciding that it's for tomorrow's meal is enough. But most Rishonim, he says, don't follow that, because you may change your mind. When Shabbos comes in, you were planning to use it for the next day, but then some extra guests come or whatever. Maybe you'll change your mind.
Brings it as a halacha.
No, he brings it as an opinion in halacha, but he doesn't bring it in the Shulchan Aruch. You understand? In the Beis Yosef, he quotes it, but he says that it's only like 3 Rishonim bring it, nobody else does, so it doesn't seem to be the halacha. Okay, so V'imhuska bekash oy begvava, if it was heated with straw or with stubble, mutar lahashis aleh, you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to leave the food on it. Afilu ina legur for lektuma, even if it's not covered, because that heat source dies down so quickly. I don't know if we have anything equivalent in our kitchen today. Okay. Now, just for your information, if it is already fully cooked and mitstamek v'raloi, right, it's starting to go bad, starting to get burned, or for that matter, in the next opinion, which the Rama is going to bring, which is that once it's half cooked, it's enough. Now, for that, you could have it in an uncovered flame, no problem, and you can even have it in a tanner, which is what we're going to discuss right now, an oven. Okay, Hagah. First, the Rama makes a note. Kiras amasima zu etzel zu v'dovish l'charas b'nei ma'achas gufa v'ktuma v'shniya ena gufa v'ktuma mutar lishes al gufa v'ktuma afal pisha moise hel mish ena gufa v'ktuma. If you have two of these types of ovens, one is covered, one is not, and you're putting it on the covered oven, it's okay even though it's next to the uncovered oven. Again, not such a practical thing. I don't think we really have it today, but the point is just like you can put it outside of an uncovered oven, you could put it on top of a covered oven that's next to an uncovered oven, because the covered oven, which is what it's on, is okay. And the uncovered oven, which is next to, it's only next to. It's not on top of it. So that's okay. Okay, let's learn a little bit further. V'taner afilu husok b'kash v'gvava aser afilu lismech lai. Afilu im hu gorov v'katom. A tanner, which we discussed, is a oven that is wider on the bottom, narrower on the top. Even if it was heated with kash and gvava, which is straw, you cannot put anything even next to it, even if it's covered. Let us buy as long as it's too hot to touch. How much more, so you're not allowed to put in it or on it. Okay, so here's the halacha when it comes to an oven. An oven retained its heat so well that no matter what type of fuel you used, and even if you covered it, it stayed hot, and therefore we were concerned always that you might stoke the coals, as long as it was something you might care to stoke, like it was tasting better as it cooked. If it's tasting worse as it's cooked, it's no problem. And according to the opinion of Hananya, who says once it's half cooked, you're not concerned, that would also be allowed in a tanner, in that type of oven. Now, for your information, our ovens of today are not considered a tanner. They are considered a kira. They have the same status as a kira, because our ovens have a door on the side, and therefore they don't retain their heat as well as those ovens. Now, what's the practical application of that if you want to leave something in an oven? In an oven, it's not very easy to cover the heat source. How are you going to cover the heat source? I mean, the heat is coming from all around. You would have to make a metal box, like some people do for Pesach, by the way. Make a metal box and put it in the box, because the metal is blocking between the heat source and the stove and the food. Excuse me. That's not very practical. So the only practical way to put something in an oven, Ashkenazi. Because if you're Sephardic and you put something in an oven, you're not going to be able to cover that heat source, not easily at least. And the only way you could put is something that's basically burning, fully cooked, and tasting worse as it's cooking. So that's not so simple. Ashkenazim, on the other hand, once it's half cooked, even though it's getting better, they could leave something in an oven, even though it's considered an open heat source. All right, so just to review a little bit of what we learned about a kira, which is a rectangular oven. We learned about a tanner, which is a hotter oven. We learned the opinion of Hananya, which is that once something is half cooked, we're not concerned that you're going to stoke any heat source, and you can leave it on an open flame from before Shabbos. We learned the opinion of the Chachamim that say that as long as something is continuing to improve in its taste, we're concerned that you may stoke the coals, and therefore you cannot leave it on an open heat source. You have to cover that heat source from before Shabbos. And we learned that the Mechaber paskins like the Chachamim, and that's how Sephardim follow. We did not yet get to the Ramah, but the Ramah will paskin like Hananya, who is more lenient. All right, there's a lot more to learn, but we're going to stop from Ma'ariv, and whoever's email address I don't have, if you don't mind just writing it down, so I can send you an email with the notes, and also let me know if you want me to buy you the Alter Shulchan Aruch. I can try to look into the Mishnah Berurah in English also and see if I can buy those as well.
I like it because we have a more, we can study the other, we have a long table,
Which
where we study all the time.
the base medrash?
No, they have
it's
classes,
Tuesday nights.
and they have classes over
Tuesday
there.
nights they have
They have
classes.
Lighthouse.
So it's better to
Monday
study
night,
here.
they have a class. too.
Yeah. All right, Yossi and David and Daniel. We didn't hear much from you, but I hope you followed.
Rabbi, I had some questions, but I wrote them down in the chat.
About what? Oh, you wrote the line in the chat. Rabbi, how do you know if a piece is still raw?
Yes, I already answered that.
It hasn't reached Yad Letters by. It shouldn't reach Yad Letters by before Shabbos. How late do you have to throw it in? As long as you know it doesn't reach that level. Yeah, you got it?
Yeah, I guess I asked that before.
An oven that has been turned off is basically like grufa. That would be like grufa. So then Sfardim could leave it in, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. My pleasure. Is it possible to watch this group chat again on replay to review? Absolutely. It will be uploaded and I'll email it out again later. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Daniel, you know Daniel Tahani.
Oh, where is he? Yeah.
He's an Aventura.